Catherine, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks and weeks. And our journey together started years ago when I read your book. And then I reached out to you, and you were kind and gracious enough to come and be a moderator, a panelist on one of the leadership mindfulness sessions that I was holding that incorporated yoga and mindfulness. And yes, your book has changed my career, my life, and I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, what an honor and privilege to be with you today and what you're up to. And also, I love the way you're playing by your own rules. And that to me is very empowering, and I'm sure will empower your audience and all your clients too. So thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited. I wanted to start with talking about your journey to your book. And I wanted to hear your story a little bit. What brought you to the inspiration of writing that book in the first place? Tell us about the Awakened Company and the journey to get there.
So, first of all, let's go to New York City.
Okay.
So, Melanie, we're in New York City, and I'm going to act like you're Carolyn. So Carolyn was with me in New York City, one of my business partners at Blue Era, which was an executive search firm. And we're sitting in this very dimly lit, I'd say somewhat romantic cafe. And all of a sudden, the idea, the Awakened Company, just came into my body.
Wow.
I know. So, and I said, Carolyn, I've got to write this book called The Awakened Company. She looked at me and said, yes, you do. You absolutely do. Let's trademark it right now. I was like,
my gosh.
What? She's like, let's get the domains right now because you're meant to do this. You're totally meant to do this. So then I started, and at the time I had co-founded a business with Shahana Siddiqui on executive search. And we were building this executive search firm. It became a profit 20 in Alberta, profit 200 in Canada, was successfully sold, but they kept our culture the same. So it continues to be successful. So it's an amazing story. And we did things radically differently. Like we did unlimited vacation. And keep in mind, this is over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we were really pioneering things, doing mindfulness in organizations a long, long time ago. Like we'd call stillness breaks, where anyone in the organization could call it. We'd come into the boardroom and we'd just sit and be together for 10 minutes and then go back to our work days. So we were playing with all of these different concepts. And I thought, this is what the book is about. Originally, I started the book as a recruiting book. And my partners read it and they're like, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. But they weren't kind of enthralled by it. And when I realized the actual story, what was wanting to be written was how do we create better organizations? And so I'm like, who do I want to publish this? I thought Eckhart Tolle's publisher.
Of course.
I want the Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's publisher, to publish this. So found my way to Eckhart Tolle's publisher, Namaste. And first she was like, her name's Constance Kello. First she's like, no way am I going to publish this. No way, no way, no way. So I kept on working away like the little engine that could on this book. And she's like, well, and then I got Russ Hudson involved. He was the thought leader in the world in the Enneagram, and Christopher Papadopoulos. But I just kept on working away and working away and working away. And then Constance was like, well, maybe you want to include thought leaders. I'm like, yes, maybe I do want to include thought leaders. So I reached out to Otto Scharmer at MIT, and he did not know me from Adam, did not know me at all. And he said yes. And then I reached out to Rose Marcario, CEO of Patagonia. She said yes. And I just kept on reaching out to people and building the book. And eventually it just came into being. And Constance, I convinced her that Namaste Publishing should publish it. And it's won a number of awards, became a bestseller. And most business books only have the shelf life of 6 months. And I'm happy to say the Awakened Company is still as relevant today as it was, as you know, a decade ago, or in 2015 when it was published. So at the time, Blue Arrow was birthing, like I have kids, 2 boys, John and Mike, and I feel like that organization was also a baby. So it was being born too at the same time. So I really had a number of children. And but I walked through the process with it through to adulthood, through to becoming like a grandma when it was successfully sold. And I knew I really wanted to consult on how do we create mindful, awakened organizations. So that's what the Awakened Company now does. We consult to businesses on how to create amazing cultures where we're bringing humanity back into the workplace. So the focus is not just on the relentless pursuit of meaningless profits. It's how do we create meaningful, wonderful experiences and good livelihoods.
You hustled this book into its birth and into its creation. And it sounds like you were relentless, and because you knew that it had to be done and you knew exactly which publisher. I love that. That's amazing. And so the Awaken Company was born with the book or after the book?
Well, the Awakened Company was born with the book. Yeah, so it emerged and flourished with the book.
With the book. And now, tell me a little bit about the work that you do. Give me some examples of what you do for companies. You help create amazing cultures. Do you come on to their staff and stay for a while? Do you have packages? Like, what does it look like for leaders if they want to bring you on?
Well, it's very customized. That's one thing I believe about culture. I don't believe culture can be packaged, or else we'd all have the same culture. So it's very, 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 very customized. So our vision is to ignite and sustain the fire within. So everything we do, and our values are passion, purposefulness, and playfulness. So everything we do is aimed in those directions. So we work with corporations, from small corporations to large corporations, on their corporate culture. We also do workshops on things such as the Enneagram to ignite. I was just on with a major international firm doing a whole session on mindfulness in the workplace. A lot of it is on the creation of self-development. How do we develop ourselves from a heartfelt place? And we host Enneagram webinars all across the world. So we've got a very broad, we're B2B, B2C, and we're doing everything we can to ignite human potential, to ignite the possible in everybody. And there's kind of, you've read the Awakened Company, there's 3 concentric circles that I'd invite every business owner to really think about. And if we think of like a drop of water hitting the ocean, we're the drop of water. So let's awaken ourselves. So how do we do that? And then how do we awaken our relationships and our relatedness? And then how do we awaken our organizations and our communities? Like those 3 things are the 3 pillars we work on all the time. And we're a bit eclectic because and I also teach at Queen's University too, in their Masters of Innovation program. So it's like, we use business research, we use practical know-how and wisdom tradition. So it's the intersection and interplay of all those different forces that we like. That's pretty alchemical.
And some of these major corporations have already developed their cultures. So when they bring you in, tell me about that journey to bringing mindfulness into a workplace culture that's already existing, because this is a little bit new still in the world, this idea of mindfulness and leadership, and mindfulness and profit merging and intersecting. How do you bring mindfulness into workplace culture that's already established?
Well, most people are craving it because mindfulness makes us actually more productive. And yet our attention, we are in an attention economy. And the majority of people are not placing their attention where they are. Their attention is somewhere else. So for example, they might be on a Zoom call and they'll have their email open. They'll have their phone beside them. And so their attention is placed in many different directions. And that actually, we lose productivity that way. And so what we do is we teach people how to gather their attention and become more self-aware. And what we do know from the business research is the more self-aware we are as leaders, the higher performing we are. So we invite that we have a whole self-awareness process, from knowing your Enneagram type to mindfulness to what's the smallest thing we can do every day to intention. So we have very specific practices that people can actually weave into and into cultures that are already existing.
Mm-hmm. And what about entrepreneurs? I think about entrepreneurs and a few facts come to mind, really long hours, complete and utter dedication, too much stuff on their plate. How can entrepreneurs, when they're starting their companies, create a foundation that starts on the right track? What tips would you give a startup entrepreneur to begin planting these seeds in their workplace culture for their people?
So for me, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I cannot help but to create, and I see entrepreneurs as we're kind of the ultimate in terms of control of our destiny.
Mm.
So, and to be really mindful of how we use our time and place our time. So, for example, with Blue Era, I was very deliberate. I'd be home for the kids, and then I'd be home for them until they went to bed, and then I'd go back to work. And also the whole setting up of unlimited vacation, that's a huge thing. And it's also very, when you think of the pillars, so awakening ourselves, awakening our relationships, and awakening our organizations. So to awaken ourselves, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, couple up with somebody who knows, who's kind of your missing piece, who has strengths where you don't, would be a big piece of advice. Being educated in mindfulness, so like knowing, take 5 minutes break, go for a walk outside, get into your body, use your senses to experience the world. That would be another. In terms of relationships, if you want to build a really healthy culture from the outset, positively notice your people, positively notice everybody who you're working with, and it creates a whole different field to flower from. And in terms of the organization, energize, sustain, and regenerate. What do I mean by that? Get really clear on your vision, get really clear on your metrics for success, get really clear on how you're going to celebrate your success as well. And then you want to sustain that by having healthy values, a sense of care and connectedness, and a sense of structure, making sure the structure is clear. And then the third pillar is regeneration, and that is allowing time for innovation, creativity, and stability and peace. So having those different pillars are very, very important. And clarity, 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 clarity.
Clarity. And to me, clarity is so unbelievably tied to mindfulness. I feel when I'm feeling fuzzy and when I'm feeling unclear, I know what to do now. I know I have to sit, or I know I have to do yoga and get quiet and still to get clear. And I find with a lot of my entrepreneur colleagues, clarity is one of the biggest challenges because you're pulled in so many directions and you have lack of focus, naturally, because of how busy you are. And sometimes clarity can be overshadowed by the doing and the must do's and the to do list. So, how do you teach people, that aren't meditators like you and I? Like, how do you teach the regular leaders out there how to get to clarity? Like, what are some of the tricks that you would recommend?
So here's some hacks. Is number one, don't pick up your phone as soon as you wake up, because our phone, we're falling in love with our phones. It actually activates the dopamine in our brain. So we're actually physically falling in love with them. So number one, I'd say set deliberate email times in your days so that you're not relentlessly on your phone. And same with social media, set deliberate times around social media. That is one. And attention is a precious resource. It's all we really have, and our attention is often distracted. So for entrepreneurs, really feel your feet. Just feel your feet, and then dive into whatever it is that your attention is being called to. So
Feel your feet. I love that. Just stop, focus on your body, and then clarity comes.
Yeah.
So true. It's so true. One of the things you just said really resonated with me. I wrote it down. positively notice your people. What does that mean? Does that mean give props? Does that mean, what does positively notice your people actually mean?
So we all know that there's an engagement issue in our organizations, and I'll give some data. So that least engaged people are those who are not noticed at all. The second most are those who are negatively noticed. The most engaged people are those who are positively noticed. So catch people in the act of doing the right thing. And it could be as simple as, hey, that was a great email. It could be as simple as, hey, that was a great project accomplishment. It could be bigger. It could be hosting a celebration of somebody's accomplishments. It could be sending people away. It could be sending them a present. It could be just writing a thank you note. But for us to kind of create a groundswell of positive noticing, because our brain is negatively wired. So the majority of people, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. 85% are negative. 95% are repeating. So for us to kind of reprogram ourselves to think positively and to build positively to create a better world, that's the only way we're going to do it.
So positively noticing your people isn't just internal, it's taking action. It's positive noticing and also telling them or sharing with them that you've noticed something positive that they're doing.
Exactly.
Okay. I love that. I love that. And when we're so busy, sometimes the little things we just expect of our people, we just, yeah, that's your job. Keep going. But taking the time, taking just a beat to say, that was really well done, or yeah. And do you think, tell me a little bit about this repeating of thought patterns in these 60,000 thoughts a day. Is that for both women and men? Do men think as negatively as women, or do women think as negatively as men? Is it gender specific or not? Do you know?
I don't have the data on gender in terms of thoughts and negative, positive. Those are just that's the general data. And I was just speaking with a group, and one woman said, I wrote down, one thing I got them to do is to write down for 2 minutes what their thoughts were. And one woman said, 100% of mine were repetitive thoughts, the thoughts that I've thought before. And so, like, what are we reaffirming in our psyche when we do that? So the invitation is to catch ourselves thinking, what are we thinking? And then to shift it. And I sometimes talk about there's an awake asleep line. So are we more in that asleep place where life is happening to me? Or are we more in that awake place that life is happening for me? And to use whatever kind of ingredients are coming down for our recipe as fodder for us to create an alchemical stew.
And similar to business success, right? If you think about it that way, what's happening to my business versus what's happening for my business. And as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of hurdles you have to overcome and mountains you have to climb to get to success. So shifting a mindset around, from poor me, the market's doing this, to what is happening for my business to succeed, and shifting that perspective could really set your trajectory in a different way.
Very much so. Like, for example, when COVID happened, I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And so I was like, Russ, let's do some webinars to be of service to people during this time. And so you'll find a whole bunch of free webinars on our YouTube channel. And that eventually moved into a whole webinar series. So using what life presented us to be of service to humanity in a different way. So that's the invitation. And life will throw us curveballs. So it's how we're using that for our own growth, our own learning, our own development, to be of service to something other than ourselves. And there was a story, I love the story. There was when COVID first hit, how the wipes were all sold out. There were a whole bunch of university students who lost their jobs, and they started a business selling wipes soaked with alcohol. And I thought that was so ingenious of them to do.
It's like, why not? Huh? We know there's a need in the market. We have time. This is easy. Let's go.
Exactly. But to use life, the invitation is really to use life to build our businesses. And organizations will solve the world's most pressing challenges. There's no other way. So while some people might be hard on businesses, there's no other way. I think only by us working differently together are we going to solve the world's biggest challenges.
So true. Let's talk a little bit about mindfulness in business culture again. I want to touch on that. In your words, how would you describe a mindful business culture? I mean, what does that mean? If I'm a leader and I say I really want my company to be mindful and I want my company culture to have mindfulness instilled in it, like what would be some of the signs that would indicate that you're on the right track, do you think?
Well, I think it's awakening to the moment. So being present. And a sign is that there's joy in the organization,
Ah,
that there's compassion. It's not always going to be easy. And there's a sense of resiliency as well as a result of creating a more mindful culture. Also, more clarity,
mhm,
energy, being in the dynamism of life, really, and solving problems.
mhm. And
And it's more very present to what is needed now. And I see organizations in the future taking on different forms in the sense of hybrid, in person, doing both, and being amorphous. Like if a problem needs to be solved and organizations need to come together in different ways, I see that as more of a mindful culture to solve problems, because the challenges we're facing right now are going to require a different level of thinking than we have. So I think we've got to work together differently.
the and mentality rather than the or, you know, collaborating with a potential, what would be traditionally considered a competitor, but together we're better kind of mentality to solve big world problems, especially in climate and that sort of those technologies that really need multiple solutions, not just one silver bullet.
Totally.
I love that. So signs for an awakened company, signs for knowing that you've got it right, or when you see joy, compassion, resiliency, clarity, and positive energy in your business.
Yes. And I would say to measure your culture. So one thing we know from business research is there should be 2/3 focus on corporate culture and 1/3 on financial results. So every organization I feel should have cultural metrics, because what gets measured gets managed. And I think everybody should have their own unique cultural metrics. This is why I don't believe in the cookie cutter approach to culture. I think it needs to be customized to what it is that you want to create, because when you start to measure it, people will start leading towards that.
Mhm. So measuring those values that you've indicated, not just having them painted on the wall somewhere in the boardroom, but actually putting metrics around measurement and making sure that engagement is there and the company is telling you if you're on track. Uh,
Totally. And just let's talk about when you said, things on the walls. One thing that's really important too with culture that I learned from Blue Era, and from working with a lot of organizations, is it is so important for us all to repeat our values and visions so that everybody actually knows what it is, so that we can actually embody it. Because
mhm.
in so many organizations, I'll walk in and they won't know what their vision is, what their values are, the majority, including the CEO. So there's something in that where we need to shift that.
Mm, so true. It's the way of the future. Speaking of the future, let's talk about these new generations that are coming into leadership positions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I love working with millennials. I love it. A lot of people that traditional leadership roles that have looked at, the baby boomers that are just leaving leadership positions where they had to work their butts off to get to where they were and they had to do the 9 to 5, and they look at millennials with a little bit of a different lens perhaps than you and I. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this new generations coming into leadership positions. Are you hopeful? Do you like what they're prioritizing? What are your observations?
how can I not be hopeful? Of course I'm hopeful. And I'm excited because I think there's a certain social conscience and a certain freedom that they'll do what they want to do. And I really like that. We're doing something very bold for the Awaken Company. We've never done this before. We're doing an Enneagram under 30 session, which is like, I'm thrilled that we're doing that. Really, really thrilled that we're doing that. But I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. And I find them very empowered. And I also I was meeting with a group of people, of young women, actually, I would say younger women. And I just gave kudos to them because they're far more empowered than I was when I was their age. I was still in that traditional mode of repeat the way the man did it. And they're not. And I was like, this is progress. So I'm incredibly hopeful.
Totally.
And
Me too. I like
the Great Resignation. I call BS. I think what we've got to say is we aren't providing the cultures and the organizations that are igniting to humanity. So invitation, everybody. People will work and want to get paid less or be okay with getting paid less if the work is meaningful, interesting, and challenging. So I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And there's purpose too behind what people are willing to sign up for. I work in clean tech, and the passion is inherent in a lot of these younger folks that are coming into the workplace from university or from college or from school, any school. They're coming to the workplace and they really care about the what and the why, more than they care about how much I'm being paid and what does it look like on my resume. It's awesome. And you're right, they're empowered and they care deeply about the vision and the purpose of the organization. And they care about their time off. It's important for what I'm noticing for millennials that are coming into the workplace or younger to have that work-life balance. So they're looking for leaders that have that too.
Absolutely. And organizations. Yeah.
Yeah. How important is it from top down? Tell me some of the stories, I guess, if you have any that you can share that something wasn't working. Why wasn't it working to get to mindful culture? What are some of the fatal flaws that a leader should know about when they're trying to instill a certain culture in their organization?
Leaders cast a long shadow. So what do I mean by that? I mean that their self-awareness has a profound impact on the firm. And also self-awareness is a really good Melanie, I have to tell my son to be quiet. Can you hear him?
You probably heard my kid.
Just no, can you hear him or no?
I can, just a little bit, but I'm sure you can hear my kids too.
No, not at all. Here, I'm just going to tell Michael I'm on a podcast.
Sure.
No, I love it. I am on a podcast. Please go downstairs. I sent it to Mike and Kent, but not to Michael. Gosh, there we go. Sent. Sorry about that, Melanie. That can be, we can edit it.
Yeah, sure. We'll edit that out. Simone, edit that out.
Okay, so what was the question?
The question was, you started saying leaders cast a long shadow.
Okay, so leaders cast a long shadow. And what that means is that our personality, our energy tends to get replicated and reinforced in our organizations. And also the degree to which we are aware or not aware in our organizations. And it's like every leader has mirrors all around them because people will really tell you what you want to hear. So I think leadership is something to pay utmost importance to create healthy cultures. And we want leaders who are aware, individually aware, who stimulate people intellectually, who consider people as individuals, and who are inspirational. And so those all begin with I's, but really leadership's about the other. How do we elevate the other? And that's where the focus needs to go to in terms of creating healthy cultures. And so often I've seen the command and control, and it just doesn't work anymore. It's done, D-O-N-E. And
No, it
whereas
is done.
it's so done. And so the invitation is to really change our leadership. There's also baked in healthy organizations, there's baked in measures that protect the culture. So what do I mean by that? If somebody doesn't fit, they're often walked out sooner than in an unhealthy organization. And there's this, and there's such a thing as being kind versus being nice. Being kind, if somebody's not a fit, is saying some unwanted turnover is a good thing, versus being nice is having a wrong fit in and keeping them for a long time. And then that gradually erodes the culture. I've kind of flipped that example on its head for you. So really, it's all about the people. We need to consider the people and building great cultures, measuring culture, and our own leadership for how we showing up, how we building relationships, how are we energizing, sustaining, and regenerating ourselves and our organizations.
Hmm. It's so interesting that you say that around that awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of a cultural fit versus not. I want to touch on both of those. The first one is self-awareness. It's very humbling for people, especially in leadership positions, to recognize a lack of self-awareness. So,
Mhm.
because we're ourselves, of course, we think we know ourselves, right? We work hard, we do our thing, but how do you know if you need to work on your self-awareness? Like, where do you even start? Is it from looking at how others treat you? Is it like, where do you get the hints that you need to work on your self-awareness?
I think if we're still on this planet, we need to work on our self-awareness.
Fair enough.
Like
Fair enough.
really, like, and I think it's a lifelong journey. And I think it's one of the most profoundly interesting journeys is to truly know ourselves and what are all the peaks and valleys within our own being? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? So number one is begin with, okay, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? And doing mindfulness practices, a tremendous opportunity to grow in self-awareness, using the Enneagram, understand what our Enneagram type is, understand what our instincts are, understand what our blind spots are, so that we can cultivate our full humanity. Like I've been studying the Enneagram since I was 15. I'm a social 8, or have the, I'm not am a social 8. I have the propensity to be more of a like a social 8. And so what do I work on? I work on the traits that are not as strong within me. And those are like the 4, 5, and 9, the more receptive energies. Those I work on cultivating. And it's all the time. And to catch myself in the act of, okay, is this coming from presence or is this coming from my personality, my ego? So I think it's a self-awareness. It's a
Mhm.
truly, Melanie, it's a lifelong journey, and it's a fun journey if we choose to do it.
Mm, I agree with you. And the more you dive into it, the more vast it becomes and the more you discover. And it's humbling, isn't it?
Oh,
um,
yeah, it's very humbling. And then I'm really into science too. And you look at some of the quantum physics around who we are, very, very profound. The fact that you and I, just by us observing each other, we change everything from a scientific perspective.
mm,
So by us just observing our cultures, our leadership styles, our friends, our family, we're changing the entire stream of being. Like that's pretty
mm,
profound.
it is. It's incredible. I wanted to touch on one other thing that you talked about with this idea of having conviction to protect the culture in such a way of acting with kindness and letting go of those individuals that don't fit within the company culture. It's such a tricky thing for leaders, especially with A players, hard workers that get stuff done but maybe don't fit the company culture. I think it's one of the hardest things I've encountered in my career is understanding when is the right moment to decide this person isn't a fit despite their abilities. Can you talk to that a little bit and how damaging it could be to keep that person on, even if they are a hard worker for company culture?
Yes. So number one is, first of all, to make sure your vision values are clear so that you have metrics to measure people again. For example, if somebody's not playful, purposefulness, or purposeful or passionate, they're not going to be a fit with the Awaken Company. Like, we're this kind of wild, zany, eclectic group of people that those are our values. And what happens is those people who aren't a fit, it's like they're a tax on the organization. They slow everything down. And also the trust tends to be diminished too when that happens, when they're not a cultural fit. And everything just gets slower, more muddy and gucky. And then relationships also tend to fall apart when there's not that kind of that fit. And it's not that they're bad people. No, not at all. It's just that they just do not fit the organizational culture. So to screen for culture is also very, very important. So having those clear ideas of what your culture stands for and articulating them and measuring them, it makes everything easier.
Trying to screen and do their job up front is so important.
Yeah.
It's that fast decision making and walking, making sure somebody doesn't stay longer than when it starts to erode to become muddy. And you almost need to figure that out in advance or try and screen for that early on. And it's so hard. I find that really hard because as a leader, you really want to help train somebody. You really want to help grow your people. And so if it's not a cultural fit, it's like, how do I change this person? But really that's unfair to that human.
Yeah.
If you're trying
It's
to
not
change.
kind. It's not kind. It's not even nice, actually. That's not even nice.
It's
But if
true.
we're to do, what's kind is to move them on. It may not be nice, but it's kind. And nice is to
Yeah,
placate, not to speak the truth.
so true.
Well, and that's
It's
the thing
so
about
true.
mindfulness, right, Melanie? Mindfulness, it's got a fierceness to it. It's not just softness. So I think that's an important message for people to know, because it's like, how do we be real in what we're doing in organizations? And that to me is mindfulness.
Mhm.
It's got so many different tastes and
Oh, you
textures.
froze.
Oh,
Am I freezing for you? Am I freezing
yeah,
for you?
you're freezing for me. Yeah.
Ah, crap.
No, just a sec.
I don't know if it's mine or
Um,
yours.
I don't think it's mine because I think I'm pretty. Here, I'll just
Mine
stop
says
my.
full, mine says full bars, but
Mine's good.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That statement, that statement shook me a little bit. Mindfulness has a fierceness to it.
It really does. And it has got so many different flavors and textures and components to it, because to be mindful is to be in the moment, and every moment has different sensations that come along with it. And
Mm,
to follow the path of mindfulness is fierce compassion.
mm. I love that. I love that. It's true. It's not just a soft Zen humming kind of thing. It's a laser sharpness and a clarity that is indisputable. I love that. So how can people find you and find the Awakened Company? Where do they find you? How can they get in touch with you if they want to discover more?
So awakencompany.com is our website. Sign up for our newsletters. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the socials. They tend to have different focuses, each one. So yeah, so please sign up and join us and come and play with us. We'd love to hear from you and get your comments and insights as well. So that's where you can find us. And I've recently launched my own website. So, and that's catherinearbel.com. And that's because my brave, bold team said, Catherine, you need your own website. And they created it with me. I was
Oh,
really
I
proud
love
of them. And it was really uncomfortable for me.
Well, that's brave and courageous of you, and I can't wait to check it out. I will put all of this information in the show notes as well, so people can find you and get you to help them with their culture, with their company, with everything that you do to change the world and move the needle in organizations and in relationships. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank
Uh,
you.
well,
It's
thank
so important.
Mm. Well, thank you for doing this podcast and for choosing to feature us. That's great. Thank you, Melanie.